is up, everybody? Welcome back to Slow Your Roll. Today we got our first college football episode of the season. I know y'all show your support over there on the NFL one just this past week. Appreciate y'all tuning in again. I'm joined by some new people today. Connor, Jake, introduce yourselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Connor. I'm a student at Oregon State University. I run beat support on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That's kind of what I do. I'm a college football nerd, so this category is kind of perfect for me in a way. Yeah, that's a little bit about me so far.
Yeah, I'm Jake. I go to TCU, go Frogs. The football team has sucked this year, so, I've been watching a lot of other teams play football. So, yeah, we got a lot to get into today, boys.
Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you for that. This past weekend was crazy. We saw some names jump up that Heisman list. We saw some guys solidify themselves in it. We saw some teams, suffer some pretty devastating injuries to their team. So there's a lot we got to talk about today, but I wanted to start off with the state of the Heisman race, what you guys think it is, and how you guys think it will play out over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so again, the way the Heisman was for me is the most talented, like the player with the most talent, who is most talented in my opinion, and the player that is doing the most they can in their situation. And when all that comes down, even when his team has 3 losses, I still have Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman. I think what he's doing is special, especially when it comes to his all-around dominance, all around like yards, all-around touchdowns. He's, even with the critics saying how they're playing him too much, how he's in blowouts, I think it's just a coaching thing. Like, coaches stick with their guys, and it's not like OSU has anybody to look forward to in that quarterback room after him. They're kind of going to be in a little bit of a lull, kind of like a little bit of like a dead period. So might as well just take full advantage of Jaden. And LSU has been historic for blowing some games in the past. I mean, they're not really the best team when it comes to second half leads. But I really do think that if the Heisman race were to end right now, I would give it to Jaden Daniels. They have a talented team, but they would be nowhere near the top 25 if it was for Jaden, in my opinion. I think that what he's doing, the way he's able to lead a team like LSU that doesn't have the best defense, they don't have the best D-line, the secondary is pretty weak. Linebackers are pretty good with Harold Perkins, but all around, I think that what Bo Nix is doing is great as well. What Michael Penix is doing is great. I think that Jaden Daniels is my number 1 Heisman right now.
So do you think that LSU is intentionally keeping Jaden Daniels in longer than they should to give him a shot at Heisman? For example, last week against Georgia Southern, he scored 3 TDs in the second half of a game they were up by 42. So do you think that's like intentional, or do you just think that's normal to keep your starting quarterback in when you're up 42 against a lesser ball club?
Knowing Brian Kelly, he's not the best strategical coach. I mean, I think they could have just been leaving him in because of, Brian Kelly. I mean, I don't really think that a lot of coaches don't think about awards. A lot of coaches just go for the win. And when it comes to things like that, was it interesting they left him in? Yes, for sure. Do I blame them? No, not really. I mean, it's Daniel's last year in college. Maybe he wanted to stay in. Maybe he told coaches, I want to be in, because he wants to play every minute he can. And because especially with a guy like Jaden and his NFL future, we don't know if there's going to be guys looking at like, oh, we're going to focus on your athleticism. You're not going to be quarterback. You're going to be wide receiver. You're gonna transition to a different spot. And I think obviously people are going to say they want to stay in. But when you have a guy like Jaden who's like a leader of the team and he says he wants to stay in, coaches let him in. I mean, that's probably what happened, honestly. I don't really think they look at awards too much.
Okay. Jake, what do you have to say about the Heisman race?
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Daniels is an incredible athlete, great quarterback, 8 touchdowns, even if it's against Georgia State, is nothing to sneeze at. But to me, and maybe it's just because I'm wearing green, but Bo Nix to me is my front runner, okay? This man has 35 touchdowns in the air, 5 on the ground, and only 2 interceptions. There's nobody else who's keeping the ball like he is. And then while Jaden Daniels is an incredible athlete, his stats are also good. And, he's done incredible, especially with the LSU defense being putrid this year. The biggest thing, and you hate to turn what's supposed to be a player award into a team thing, to have them affect it, but Oregon we're talking about as a playoff team. LSU, for sure, is a top 25 team, but we're not talking about them in the same light, and I think that's where those two differ. But to me, there's not a big gap between them. Bo Nix for me is 1A, Jaden Daniels is 1B. But I think Bo Nix will even put up this week against Oregon State. Not quite like he did against ASU where he had more touchdowns than incompletions, but it's an important game. It's a good rivalry, and I think Bo Nix is going to lead Oregon to beat Oregon State by multiple scores this week and solidify himself as the Heisman frontrunner.
I know Connor didn't like that take, but
not at all.
Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about, this is a year where it's a little bit less obvious who's going to win the national championship. It's not a situation where we got Georgia winning 65-7 again. That's not going to happen. Who are your guys' favorite and then a dark horse to win the national championship?
My favorite, if I had to choose a team right now to win it all, it's Georgia.
Okay.
I'm going to be pretty plain here. It's Georgia. Until someone proves me different, I'm going to stick with them. They're the most dominant team in college football right now. They've had their scary moments this season, but every team does. Every good team does. And Carson Beck, he's doing a really good job at QB for him. He's doing what he needs to do. He's winning them games. He's keeping them in big games and being able to kind of just do what he can to move the nail, because Georgia's defense is going to do their thing. They're always going to be pretty good. Their wide receiver talent is very, very good. Their running back room is pretty good as well. Not the best that we've seen from Georgia, but it's definitely still a pretty good group of backs. My dark horse, and it could just be biased, but I think Washington really has a chance. Okay. I think that if they keep playing like they do, they're winning games. Then it's not like they're playing cupcake teams. They're winning games against good ranked opponents too, in hostile environments. I really do think that Washington definitely has the wide receiver core to do it. They have the quarterback to do it. Dylan Johnson, their running back, has really shown out there the last couple of games for him. And if he keeps doing that, they have a good running game. Their secondary looks better and better every week, especially with Jabbar Muhammad. Excuse me. He's looking stellar in that secondary. Against Oregon State, he was targeted 6 times, allowed 0 catches, had an interception and 3 pass deflections. That's absurd. They have a good D-line. The linebackers could use some work for sure. But I really do think Georgia's my favorite right now, and Washington's my dark horse.
So with a team like Washington, does it scare you at all, some of their really close victories, such as Arizona State by 8, in a game where it literally, the difference ended up being a pick 6, and along with that, a 9-point victory over Stanford, 10 points over unranked USC, 7 over Utah, and 2 over Oregon State? Do those scare you that they're just scraping by?
It would, if I knew that. So good teams win games. Good teams are able to finish out close games like that. And in conference play, those teams that don't look the best on paper, they have nothing to lose. They play like it's a winner, like winner. They play like they should. They Pac-12 teams, people don't realize about Pac-12 teams. They play so hard against their conference foes, especially when it comes to Arizona State. They have nothing to lose this season under a new coach, under a new system, under a new whole entire team basically, because they pulled a lot of guys out of the portal. They're gonna play very, very hard for their new coach. Kenny Dillingham is gonna do great things over there. Stanford, that one was a little questionable in my opinion. Stanford's not a good team. I think they just had a bad game and they were able to close it out. Their secondary has shown some weak spots this season against teams like Stanford for some reason, because they have Ayomanor, who's a really good wide receiver, torched them all game. The wins over Utah and Oregon State, those don't scare me at all. I think those are just 2 gritty ball clubs that have physical play styles. Those games are always going to be close. But the way Washington was able to pull victories out against these clubs, even in unfavoring situations, I think it's a good sign for them. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, Jake, what do you have to say about your national championship contenders?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of people want it to go this way, but I think Georgia is the front runner. They should be the front runner. I know people don't want them to three-peat, myself included, but you look at teams like Ohio State and Michigan, one's going to take each other out this weekend. You look at teams like Washington and Oregon that are good, but the biggest discrepancy between these SEC teams and usually the rest of the country is in the O-line and the D-line. And I don't think either Washington or Oregon have the trenches really to put up with Georgia. And then you look at FSU, obviously dealing with a very difficult injury at quarterback with Jordan Travis. I think if they go in, they'll probably be in at the 4 seed. And, Georgia, I think, would be licking their chops if they got to play FSU with the backup quarterback.
Absolutely, I'd have to agree. I mean, that Florida State team, as much as they deserve to be in there, if they do wind up getting in, it's not going to be pretty, most likely. No discredit to the whole roster. They really do have some good pieces there. Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. That offense is star-studded, but without your starting quarterback at the helm, it's really tough. And once you get to the CFP, you just can't have that anymore. I mean, we've only seen that happen really one time with Ohio State in 2014 when they won the first CFP. I think they beat Alabama and then Oregon. So, JT Barrett, Cardell Jones, great QB room. But they made it happen. So, thank you guys for that. Obviously, on the subject of Ohio State, we got the game this weekend. That's a pretty big deal this year. 2 versus 3, lots of playoff implications. What do you all have to say about that game?
Funny how game day goes to this one when it's the biggest game, but not the last one. Anyway.
2 versus 3 and the most storied game in college football. It's a little different, though I understand your frustration.
I know. I was just teasing.
Okay.
I think that Ohio State really... This Ohio State team is super confusing to a lot of people because when it comes to their offense is good. And I usually don't say this about a lot of teams being a quarterback away when they're still a top 10 team, but they are. Brown isn't really doing a good... Not Brown, McCord. Sorry, Brown said back up. McCord isn't really doing a great job at leading them. I think that he's inconsistent. I think that he... even with the weapons he has multiple. He has Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Lee Scott Jr. on the tight end. These are all very good athletes.
Yep.
And there's the way they're still kind of just not showing up on the offensive end is worrying to me. But with everything going on for Michigan, with their scandals, with J.J. McCarthy being one of the more overrated quarterbacks in the country, their running game is good, but not nearly as good as last year, even if they're getting the same amount of touchdowns. Their offense looks way more dysfunctional. Their defense is best in the country, one of the best in the country. But I think Ohio State has a better rounded team. I think they have a better, more talented team, and I think they're going to pull out the victory in this one.
Good stuff there, Jake. What do you have to say about this game?
Yeah, this is a tough game. It's going to be a great game. Obviously, it's a very storied rivalry, but, Ohio State has had a lot of things going on the field necessarily, and the Michigan stuff has been off the field. Michigan's the number 1 defense in the country, and while they do have a tough time getting to the end zone, to that part of the field where they can get in the end zone, Blake Corum himself has not had a hard time getting in the end zone. Where I do worry about Michigan's chances is J.J. McCarthy going to get, 60 yards on 7 pass attempts again? Because if that's the plan against Ohio State, it's not going to happen. But it's going to be miserable weather. I think it's going to be a defensive game. I don't think the quarterbacks between both of them will have more than 30 pass attempts. And I think that plays into Michigan's hands. You know what I mean? I know, Marvin Harrison still makes it the passing game a threat for Ohio State. But, man, I just think it plays too well into Michigan's hands. So after really thinking and, sleeping on it, I got to go Michigan. Even though if they played this game 100 times, it would be split 50-50.
Michigan's a really interesting team right now. They're a really tough team to judge. First of all, we don't know how much they've known over these past 2 years that have been impacting results of games in the past. And 2, they're just kind of meh on offense. A big fall off from Donovan Edwards, who people expected to take a huge leap, which he started to make last year towards the end of the season with Blake Corum being injured. But that's kind of, receded, averaging 3.4 yards a carry, just less than half of what he was averaging last year. And Blake Corum has seen a bit of a drop-off outside of the red zone as well in his yards per carry. So, they don't have a great passing game, and the run game is, backing up a little. So we'll have to see if Ohio State can capitalize on that. I remember last year, the run game really started to kill them as the game went on, just breaking big run after big run, and felt like it just kept getting out of hand after that, which resulted in the result we all saw that happened. So that's what I think. So, another thing that happened this weekend, College Game Day. That was in James Madison versus Appalachian State. Was not at Washington, Oregon State, much to the dismay of much of the country. And James Madison ended up losing that game on top of that. They went in undefeated and lost when they got Game Day. What do you guys make of that? How do you feel about that decision?
Well, it all went wrong when that one JMU kid killed a kid with his kick on the College Game Day show. But no, but like,
good shout.
Thank you. But man, I just think it's tough too. If you're JMU, you're pounding on your chest saying like, we deserve it. You have the people behind you, Pat McAfee behind you. They literally get rid of a top 10 matchup to go to watch JMU play, and then to lose to Appalachian State. I don't even care if it was in overtime. It's really tough. I think it's really deflating. I think a lot of the fans might be done with the season just because it's kind of humiliating. You got to eat your crow before the season's even over. I still think they can make a good bowl game potentially. They could still whatever, but the whole thing with the NCAA and just to let Appalachian State trip you up. Props to Appalachian State, by the way. But yeah, at some point, I think this kind of shows where it's tough because we want to give attention to smaller teams, right? We want to give attention to Cinderella stories. But at the end of the day, Washington didn't lose their game. JMU did. And it's because Washington is a real team.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
I am still upset with the NCAA not letting them bowl. I think they deserve it, obviously. Obviously, I'm an Oregon State homer. I was extremely upset when I found out that they weren't going here for game day, which I think they should have. It's the best game. It was the best game in the country that week. And when I saw JMU lose, I had a little smirk on my face because I was just like, karma. And Appalachian State is a home record team. Obviously the Michigan upset long ago. They went to Texas A&M last year, beat them on the road. They've done this in North Carolina too. Appalachian State is a team that you never ever want to see on your schedule on a home game when you are a hyped up team. And JMU learned that. And to be fair, the JMU crowd on game day was fantastic. They had record numbers. Like it was beautiful. I looked at the broadcast. It looked amazing. The game wasn't amazing, but that's besides the point. JMU's season is probably I can see them losing a couple more games. I think their players might be done. They had the whole I'm undefeated Cinderella route that they were going for, like the America's team route, and then when you go out and lose a game on game day to a team that's not even that great, you start to really kind of lose hope for the season. And it sucks for JMU, but it gave me a little smile on my face. I'm going to be honest.
Safe to say game day will not be back there for quite some time.
No, because JMU going to be good this year. I don't next year. I don't know they're going to be good at all next year. I don't know. It's really tough.
They're not supposed to be. They just came up to the FBS level. They're not supposed to be doing crazy things right now. The fact they're 9-0 is impressive in itself. I think people got to shorten their expectations just a little bit, give them a break here. Of course, though, game day makes this a bigger deal.
Yeah, but then you're just stuck thinking, what could have been, but, if they're not allowed to play a bowl game, then unfortunately there's not a lot that could have been. So,
absolutely.
Maybe it's kind of for the best because we can focus now on, playoffs and all that stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So, one thing that's been happening, the downfall of USC after their solid start, I guess you could say. complete and utter downfall since. Caleb Williams, he's a junior. What's next for him? Staying, leaving, where's he going? Who's going to draft him?
The NFL draft. He's already checked out. He's already done with USC. He looks like he's done. I don't think he plays another down of college football after this season. The whole like owners equity thing that was pushed on him, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of false. This is the one thing I think he's overhated, just because of like he's a confident kid, which he should be. He's a Heisman winner. He's one of the best quarterback prospects I've seen since like Patrick Mahomes, since like a lot of these other guys. He's a very, very, very talented player, and with that brings a lot of hate, especially going to a school like USC, which is notoriously hated. They're in a big market. There are a lot of media attentions around them, and every single camera's on him at all times. So even like the small bad moments gets him because they're all over the media at after that. And I think I think the way this season's gone, the way they've fallen off a cliff when it comes to how they're doing, I think he's done. I think there's not really much else he can do. Alex Grinch being gone is a huge step for USC, which I'm glad they did that. Even though he was recruiting well, he couldn't return those recruits into anything. I said this in a tweet earlier. The only school I've seen downgrade 5-star prospects, especially 5-star defensive backs like this, is USC. I don't know how they do it. They make them worse than when they come out of high school, and it's just weird to me. But yeah. The downfall of USC is obviously, it makes me smile a little bit. I don't like USC, but I like Caleb Williams, and I think that what is happening to him, what the negative light has been shining on him, even though it's not all totally on him, is a little unfair, and I think he can't wait to get out of it.
Yeah. Do you think he is the surefire number 1 pick going into this draft?
I would say like a 75-80% chance.
Okay,
I don't say number 1 for sure.
So, since you're saying that, let me follow it up with, what is that other 25%?
I think teams could definitely go. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is definitely up there. He's one of the best wide receiver prospects in a minute. I mean, obviously his father is Marvin Harrison. He's almost a perfect NFL receiver. I don't think there's a weakness in his game, really.
Yeah.
I think that he's perfect for the NFL. I think teams could take a shot on him over. It's a very slim chance, which is why I'm saying like the 20%.
Yeah.
And a team just falls in love with him, or like a team that doesn't need a quarterback that has like Panthers, for instance.
Yeah.
If they were able, wait, did they have their first round pick?
The Panthers? No.
Yeah.
No. The Bears have that pick.
That's interesting.
So, well, yes, exactly. If there's a team like the Cardinals or the Bears that gets first pick, that Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, those aren't 100% franchise guys, but those aren't guys that are like, we need to start over with a quarterback right now either. So I think that's where your point comes in.
Yeah, I also like, especially with the Bears, I don't think they give up on Fields for a little bit.
Okay.
They spend too much for him. They kind of rallied around him a little too much. I think they shouldn't give up on him yet.
Yeah.
I think his talent is up there for one of the more talented quarterbacks. I think he just needs to get better weapons. He needs to get in a better offensive system. Not DJ Moore and Cole Kmet aren't going to cut it,
Yeah, absolutely.
And him getting Marvin Harrison Jr. could change a lot of things for him.
Absolutely. So. It's very similar to me to Jalen Hurts' first couple seasons in the NFL, honestly, with the Eagles. They were putting it all together. That receiving core was absolutely awful. We saw the likes of Travis Fulgham going off for people's fantasy teams for a couple weeks and never heard from the man again. So we'll have to see what happens there, how the Bears play that. Jake, what do you have to say about the upcoming draft and, top 5 picks-ish? What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think fortunately for teams that do want a quarterback, Caleb Williams does seem very fed up with USC. It's hard to be the 12th best offense and then, the 117th best defense. I also think that, there's some antics that Caleb Williams does that personally, irks me with his personality, writing F Utah on your fingernails. Because, if you write F49ers on your fingernails and he goes to the Cardinals, they're going to break his spine. But the thing is, it's just there's been quarterbacks who have done worse things. Baker Mayfield went number 1 overall, and no hate to Baker, but he didn't play as well in college as Caleb Williams did for that many years. And, he also had arguably worse stuff, too, and worse character issues. So, unless, the original team, hops out of 1, and then another team trades up, I mean, it really depends who gets that 1 spot to me, but I think there's a lot of ways it lands with 1. I like Penix a lot in this draft. But I just think the smaller sample size might give teams more hesitancy to take him early on. Marvin Harrison, talent-wise, is probably the best in this draft. But just because he plays receiver, and it seems like you get, 1,000-yard receivers just falling out of the sky these days, do you need to pick him top 3? Not essentially. I think it really comes down to, what do we see with the rest of the NFL season? Who continues to struggle? Who continues specifically on the bad teams to struggle? If we see Kyler bring it back up with a new head coach after being injured, then it's like, okay, Cardinals definitely aren't drafting a quarterback. Maybe they go after Marvin Harrison. Maybe they go after someone, defensively. But the Bears are interesting because they could go and get a quarterback. But we see teams like the Eagles. We see teams like the Niners. Even teams like the Chiefs, realistically, who had a team around them and then got their guy who they thought could be generational. But you didn't have Hurts, who is generational in this way. You didn't have Mahomes, who is generational in this way. You know what I mean? So then you take the route like the Bengals, where it's like, hey, we're just going to get the guy who we think is the dude, and then we'll build the team around him. The only problem is the Bears seem like, if they got 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, 3 of them total might be good.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bears definitely have a lot of problems top to bottom, Running back room isn't great. The offensive line room is not phenomenal. You got DJ Moore. The receivers, okay. Let me cut you a break there. They're okay. But, there's still a lot of other problems. Jalen Johnson is pretty much the only guy that's played well in the defensive level. Edmonds, that was supposed to be a big signing, hasn't performed. So
maybe not Sweat, but I mean, give me Williams and Harrison on the Bears, great. He's still gonna get hit 50 times a year. So
yeah, absolutely. So got a little bit of a rumor mill going over here in East Lansing. This past week, Michigan State University conducted second interviews with their final 4 coaches, Leopold, Candle, Fish, and Jonathan Smith of Oregon State. What do you guys make of this, and which of the 4 is going to be the hire?
I have a little bit of inside info on this. So there have been a lot of rumors about John Smith interviewing for the head coaching job. I've heard mixed bags about it. I've heard he has interviewed. I heard John Smith has not interviewed. I personally, yes, he would get more money at MSU. I think Smith could be waiting for the UCLA job to open. UCLA is not far from his hometown. He's a Cali kid. And he loves alma mater. He loves what he's building here. He's getting paid a solid amount of money. Yes, the whole conference realignment thing could change things, obviously, but we haven't even announced the schedule yet. We're still working on keeping us at a Power 4 level of play, which will keep us at a good money standpoint, especially with the lawsuit stuff going on with the Pac-12, with $500 million being split between us and Wazoo. Soon, hopefully, that could be sorted out. We won the original court case, but the other schools are appealing. I think that Smith going to MSU could happen. I don't think it will happen, but there's always a chance. I think Leopold is a really good shout from Kansas.
Okay.
I think that KU, although they are building something there, I think he could follow the money route. He doesn't really have a lot of tie to Kansas. I mean, before Kansas, he was the athletics coordinator at Buffalo.
Yep.
So his route's been all over the place. He was AD at Buffalo. I think he could go there. The other 2 candidates were who else?
Jedd Fish of Arizona and Jason Candle of Toledo.
So those 2 are interesting too. Jedd Fish, while he's building a lot at Arizona, they're under a huge scandal right now. They misplaced around $250 million. So they're going to have to cut a lot of stuff over there. I think Jett Fish could get out before it gets ugly.
Absolutely.
That could definitely be a thing that happens. I think Jett Fish is a good coach. He's better than he used to be. I don't think it'd be the best hire for East Lansing, though, in my opinion.
And, I think the last thing that MSU needs right now is another scandal coming off of their last head coaching hire. Jake, what are your thoughts on this? Who's the guy?
Yeah, when you look at the scandal, I just don't think there's a way that Fish is the guy who, ends up being there, especially with MSU wanting to be clean. It's really hard to tell because with the conference realignment and what schools are able to do with money now, and then you also see instances like, unfortunately, with Jimbo Fisher and A&M, you don't want to be paying a failed coach, almost $8 million to not even be on your team. So, I think for MSU, though, the focus has to be on, you got all this conference realignment happening. The Big Ten is getting juiced, okay? Like, it's getting juiced. You got Oregon, Washington coming in. That's just a couple of schools. They're fantastic this year, as we've mentioned. You already got Ohio, and they're also in the playoff hunt this year. It's going to get really ugly soon between the upper echelon and the rest. And you got teams that consistently fight for it. And, I'm talking about, a decade, multiple decade-long stretch. You got teams like PSU, you got Wisconsin, you got Michigan State, who, like, every now and then kind of bump their way up a little bit above their weight class. If I'm Michigan State, you got to get a guy who's kind of going to revamp your whole program, revamp, the view of the school, so that way when you do have people deciding, where do I want to play football, MSU actually looks like a competitive option. You don't want to be the bottom of the Big Ten, especially when now you're going to have those big schools in. It sounds crazy, but MSU could quickly fall down to, the likes of Rutgers in Nebraska and Iowa and Illinois, you know what I mean? So, even though Iowa's great this year, but they don't usually scare people. And you just don't want MSU to get suffocated by all these big teams coming into the same conference.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Another thing that's been pumping out of the rumor mill is that potentially we could see an announcement of the next head coach on Sunday for Michigan State following the conclusion of rivalry week. Now, I don't know who this is going to be. I don't know if it's going to happen for sure, but this is about the time right after rivalry week before bowl season that we start to see some hires, especially if it's coming from a team that's not going to a conference championship. That's when we'll see some of that start to happen. So all that I'm going to say is all of those coaches I named are coaching a game the day before Saturday, except for Jonathan Smith. I don't know if that means anything, but it's there and it's out there to the public. So we'll have to see, first of all, if this announcement comes. Of course, it could get pushed back. I don't know who the hire is. I have zero clue, and I don't have an inside source telling me. But all I can do is look at the evidence presented to me and say, there may be a connection to Jonathan Smith being the hire this upcoming weekend. So we'll have to see how that all plays out and if there's any truth to what I've been hearing and what other people have been hearing as far as these interviews go. Obviously, Connor talked about what he knows about it. Maybe Smith has been out of it for a while now. So, we'll have to wait and see, but we're about at that time, guys. Does anybody have any closing remarks or hot takes they needed to make before this podcast comes to a close?
It's not like...
Go for it, Jay.
Thank you. It's not likely, but I'm just saying, last time they're probably going to be playing in the Big 12 because we're moving to the SEC. And the Big 12 is completely known for being cannibalistic. I would not put my money on it, but don't be surprised if Texas somehow finds a way to lose against Texas Tech this weekend.
Interesting. Texas Tech, that's a team that almost beat Oregon earlier this season. So there may be some possibilities to that. Connor, do you have something you'd like to add?
Rivalry week is always full of twists and turns. Look out for the game in Eugene this weekend. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
We
knew it was coming, ladies and gentlemen. We knew it was coming.
This team's not dead in the water. We're not giving up on the season. We still have a great bowl game ahead of us.
It's looking like the Alamo Bowl or the Holiday Bowl. We keep an eye out for this Oregon State team to go into Eugene and give the Ducks a scare. That's all I'm going to say.
I remember the last time an Oregon team played an Alamo Bowl. Good times, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that, guys. Thank you for joining me. Guys, that's it for this episode. Please go check out the socials. Go follow Beeves Report. That guy, he does some okay stuff over there on Instagram, Beeves Report. Check it out. And peace out, guys. Have a good one.